Ms. Mather, your question to Mr. King first.
Okay. Should Kansas provide incentives for wind energy investment?
I think definitely it needs to. Kansas has the potential to be one of the biggest providers of wind energy in the country. Here in the Midwest, we're situated ideally with the environmental conditions to produce wind energy for states all around us. So I think anything we can do to encourage that type of a development will be good for the Kansas economy and good for jobs in the long run.
Okay.
I'm all for alternate energy, but we need to remember that for the next generation, we will need to still depend on fossil fuels. That means we need to do what we need to do in the western part of the state with the sunflower plant, which was delayed, as you know, for several years, which makes us an exporter of energy and which brings revenues and jobs to the state. I think we should continue to look at wind, solar, biofuels. All of those are meritorious, all of those ought to be considered, but all of those are also exceedingly expensive. Wind is not free. Wind blows about 42% of the time in the state of Kansas to generate sufficient energy, and you can't store it. And when you need it most, you don't have it. When it's 100 degrees in August and the wind doesn't blow, you're going to sweat. If it's 10 below in January and the wind doesn't blow, you're not going to have any energy. So there are substantial technical problems associated with all of these areas. And while I think we should do more, we also need to look at nuclear. And the Europeans are now doing a lot more. In France, nuclear power provides 82% of electricity. We haven't built a plant in 30-some years, and that's the cleanest energy you have. It doesn't pollute at all. So we need to have a package. We need to have some leadership, which we lacked in the last two administrations, which prevented us to build the plants that were out in western Kansas where we really needed them.
Mr. Putnam, your question to Mr. Kiegerl first.
Mr. Kiegerl, according to your website, you immigrated from Germany earlier in your life. That being the case, what are your thoughts on the current state of immigration in America?
Well, immigration, in my survey, I did a survey this spring, is considered the most important issue in my district, before jobs and economy. I believe in people coming here wanting to better themselves, wanting to better their life. I believe in all that. I believe that immigrants are a boon to our economy overall. However, you have to have a legal system. You have to have laws obeyed. You don't have an open border where people come across, you don't know who they are, where they are. The average family that is illegal in the state of Kansas costs us $24,800 a year. This is the taxpayer paying for medical services, et cetera, et cetera. We give immigrants that are illegally here a $8,000 advantage in tuition in the Kansas University. An American citizen born here cannot get that. That seems to me very unfair and unfortunate. And I've voted for bills in the last 6 years to restrict all benefits except for emergency medical care to those who are not here in accordance with our laws. They are lawbreakers. Remember that they come here without permission. And if we do not guard our border, we're going to have more and more of the problem, and it's going to be more difficult to solve the longer we wait. And the federal government is not doing the job, and the state has very little opportunity to interfere.
Well, Seth, my ancestors immigrated from here. Most of our ancestors, unless you're Native American, immigrated here at one point or another. And certainly, the legal way to do it is best, but I would not agree with calling children whose parents might have violated the letter of the law in coming over here. I would not necessarily call them criminals for attending our public schools, and I think it'd be a tragedy to not allow, children living here in Kansas to attend public schools. So I wouldn't punish the children for the acts of the parents. So I disagree with that attitude towards it. Basically, the people are coming here because there's jobs, and employers will put them to work and pay them money. So if we're going to crack down on anybody, let's crack down on the people that are hiring illegals and stop it at that point. Because if there are no jobs for them here, what the incentive is going to be for them to come here? So,
thank you. Ms. Bullbaum, your question to Mr. King first.
Last year, some lawmakers proposed permitting carrying concealed weapons on college campuses and in the State House. The proposal would have required that colleges and universities that declined to allow students and staff and faculty and visitors to carry concealed weapons to install metal detectors at all building entrances. What's your view on concealed carry on campus?
I'm opposed to that. That wouldn't really make me comfortable. It wouldn't make me comfortable as a parent with my kids going to school here, or if I were the one going to school here. Have you seen the amount of doors and entrances there are in this campus here? Any campus, I went to KU, you wouldn't be able to put metal detectors at all these doors to keep out guns. But it should just be banned all the way around, I think. Government institutions, things like that, there's really no point in allowing people to have guns, and I'm kind of wary of the restrictions, the training that is required for people who do have permits to carry guns. I would be pretty worried when the shooting was breaking out. Like what kind of training did this kid who's firing his weapon at somebody? What kind did he have to protect innocent people and just take out somebody who might be a threat to him? So I prefer beefing up security at campuses and government institutions rather than letting students or teachers carry weapons into them.
Well, when it comes to training of people who have concealed carriage licenses, they get 8 hours of classroom training, including law, and they have a need to demonstrate that they can handle a weapon safely. They have to actually shoot on a target. And my wife and I took the test together. She closed her eyes and got the target every time, and I had to reshoot. It shows you, if I get held up, I have to tell the criminal to come a little closer. But what I'm saying about this issue is the following. As I walk through this door, I see a sign which says no guns. And what does that do to protect you? That's a question you should ask. Because somebody who is a criminal, who wants to shoot somebody, is not going to pay attention to that sign. So I think it behooves us to take a look as to how we can protect employees, students, and others when it comes to gun violence. The criminals will always have guns. I have a worry about those who say the law-abiding citizen should not have guns, because I'm against everything that eliminates a potential victim from able to be protecting himself or herself. And so therefore, I think we need to take a look at this issue. We did not pass that bill, and I'm glad it didn't come out of committee. We didn't vote on it, but I think people need to recognize in Virginia, some guy shot 32 students, and there were 2 ex-Marines who were students who had their gun in the car. They couldn't bring them on campus. Think about the fact, if they had the gun on them, maybe we should have saved some lives. So there are 2 sides to this story.
Ms. Mather, yes.
Should Kansas fight back against the federal health care reform law?
Well, we're not fighting back. What we're doing is filing suit. We should be filing suit. Our Attorney General refused to do so. He wrote a letter instead, but 20 states are now filing suit to enforce the 10th Amendment, which means in the U.S. Constitution there are certain rights that are given to the federal government. They're very well described. All the other rights belong to the state. And forcing a citizen of Kansas, for example, to buy insurance he or she doesn't want seems to me an encroachment of the right in the state of Kansas. Now, we did not get sufficient vote to have you as constituents vote on this issue. This would have been, it would require a constitutional amendment in the state of Kansas, the Kansas Constitution, and in the final analysis, this will be all decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. But I believe that this particular bill encroaches way beyond what is acceptable to states as far as the federal government is concerned. And I'm concerned that there are more and more federal programs coming down the line, which are going to limit what we can do, and government ought to be at the lowest possible level, not in Washington. Nobody in Washington should tell people in Kansas what they can and cannot do as far as the health care is concerned.
Mr. King.
Well, I think all Americans have a right to health care, and whether they can afford to buy insurance or not. And I welcome health care reform. I really didn't think it went far enough. I'd prefer to see a universal health care, single-payer health care coverage in the country, but we didn't go that route. We've made compromises. And but bring it on. You know, I recently lost a job at Sprint, and without having a wife whose insurance plan I could go on, you know, my health would probably be in jeopardy from, you know, my health conditions, you know, if I weren't able to have any prescription drug coverage or was able to go see a doctor. So I think health care is very important to every American, and I think, you know, it's something that every American should have and needs to have, and the risk pool has to be spread across the whole population, because if you see right now, they're phasing this in, and they've got it so children's pre-existing conditions are covered, but now some of these insurance companies want to drop new coverage for children just because the risk pool hasn't spread across the whole population yet. So I'm opposed to any trying to prevent it from going into effect.
Mr. Putnam, you'll have the pleasure of asking the final question, and we ask the candidates to limit their responses to 1 minute each, please.
Okay. What do you think is an appropriate level of national debt, and how would you address the country's current deficit?
Well, I'm not an economist, so it's kind of hard to answer that question. You know, I used to always think it was pretty bad to have too much debt at all, and I sure hate to see it going up at the rate it's been going up for the last 10, 15, 20 years now. But I believe you can have some debt if you're able to factor in the anticipated growth coming in the future, but at some point you have to put on the brakes of spending. So, and talk about revenues to bring that debt down. So, and in this case, you know, I would say that giving tax cuts to the wealthy would be the worst thing we could do to the federal deficit. And it might even be bad for our state revenues as well. You know, giving those kind of tax breaks to people who don't really need it.
Mr. Kiegerl?
Well, I am an economist, and I can tell you that we are in dire straits. The dollar is dropping, and your children and grandchildren are going to pay the debt that's being piled up. We just had a comment that we need a single-payer insurance policy program. That present program will add trillions of dollars to the debt. It will not cover everybody. It has all kinds of flaws in it, but one thing we know about it, it's very costly. And we have to learn to live within our means. And that doesn't just go for the federal government, that goes for the state government. That's why I opposed the tax increase we have. We had an 18% tax increase in the last session. Every single family in Kansas pays $30 a month because of that tax increase. And in a recession, increasing taxes is toxic. It prolongs the recession, it increases unemployment, and it's just, there's nothing good to say about it. And I believe that we need to learn to live with what we have. We need to
Thank
look at
you,
the
Mr.
spending
Kiegerl.
end, not the taxing end.
I'd like to thank both of our candidates for appearing today, Mr. Kiegerl and Mr. King. I'd also like to thank our 3 panelists for helping out today. Be sure to vote for the candidate of your choice, beginning either with advance voting on October 13th or at the polls on November 2nd. Remember, your vote does count. Thank you.